The hospital corridor echoed with the metallic clatter of nails against tile, fast, desperate, and unmistakably urgent. A German shepherd tore through the sterile hallway, a blur of tan and black fur dodging startled nurses and wheeled carts. The ID tag on his collar clinked wildly with each stride. "Stop that dog!" a voice shouted from the nurses' station. But no one moved fast enough. He wasn't just any dog. His eyes burned with purpose, his pace had no hesitation, and the name on his tag, Ranger, held a weight heavier than most would ever understand. Room 309. He turned sharply, shoulder slamming into the door that hadn't been fully closed. It flung open with a bang. Inside, under soft fluorescent lights, a man lay still in a hospital bed, pale, motionless. A machine beeped steadily at his side. Ranger stopped. For a long second, the room fell into absolute silence. No barking. No breathing from the stunned nurses who had followed. The dog just stared at the man. A whisper of a name escaped Ranger's throat. Not a bark, not a growl. Just a soft, broken sound, almost like a sob. Then he moved, with careful steps, as if each inch was sacred ground. Ranger padded toward the bed. He rose up on his hind legs and rested his front paws on the edge. One of them trembled. And then he placed his head on the veteran's chest. The monitors reacted. A slight spike, a flutter. Everyone froze. The man in the bed, Sergeant Cole Matthews, hadn't spoken in days. Unconscious after a sudden post-surgery complication, the doctors had warned that if there was no change by the end of the week, decisions would have to be made. The family had already started preparing. He was a decorated Marine, a war hero. And no one expected him to open his eyes again. But then, a tear slid from the corner of his closed eye. Ranger didn't move. He just stayed there, resting his weight like an anchor, like home. The silence was broken only by a gasp from a nurse, who instinctively covered her mouth. Another flutter on the screen. Cole's fingers, once lifeless, twitched. A second later, his lips parted. Barely audible, a rasp clawed its way out of his dry throat. "Ranger?" The room collapsed into stillness. Doctors rushed in, but it was too late. The moment had already happened. The impossible had already occurred. A dog had brought a man back from the edge. But this wasn't just a miraculous recovery. This was a story that hadn't ended when the war did. This was the beginning of something that should have never been forgotten, because while Sergeant Cole Matthews had fought battles overseas, Ranger had been fighting a quieter one back home, and now they were both wide awake, together again, and the war they were about to fight was far from over. Years before the hospital monitors and tear-soaked silence, Sergeant Cole Matthews had stood under a blazing desert sun, uniform heavy with dust, eyes scanning the horizon. His squad was pinned down behind a blown-out Humvee. Bullets rained like steel raindrops across the cracked earth. Beside him, silent, motionless, waiting, was a younger, leaner version of Ranger. No barking. No panic. Just a low, calculating stare. Ranger didn't need commands. He knew. He always knew. "Go," Cole whispered. Ranger shot off like a missile. 50 yards to the east, a sniper had been shifting behind rubble. The K9 reached him before he had time to breathe. A flurry of limbs, a scream, a weapon clattered to the ground. Cole's team advanced. That was Ranger, trained to sniff out IEDs, track hostiles, and neutralize threats. But what made him different wasn't just obedience. It was instinct. He didn't wait for orders. He read hearts, not just cues. For Cole, the war was chaos. But with Ranger, there was clarity. They were deployed together for 3 tours. Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, a blur of dry heat and bone-deep exhaustion. Ranger slept beside his cot, ate what he ate. When Cole was too tired to pray, Ranger sat beside him, eyes open, guarding him like a second soul. But everything changed on a routine mission. Outside Kandahar, Cole stepped on a pressure plate, hidden under a thin veil of sand. He knew what it was before the click even echoed. Time slowed. His voice broke when he said, "Don't you dare." Ranger didn't move. "Ranger, go." Still, the dog refused. In a blur of adrenaline, Cole grabbed a loose rock and hurled it. Ranger chased it instinctively, then, boom, a flash of white, then nothing. Back home, the months passed in fragments. Cole survived, but his leg didn't. His unit was disbanded. And Ranger, injured during the explosion's aftershock, was medically retired. The military offered Cole a medal. He wanted Ranger. They told him it was complicated. Policy.red tape. Ranger was classified as government property until fully processed. Through their K-9 retirement program, in other words, months, maybe a year, there were procedures. Cole didn't sleep that night. He didn't sleep for a week. When they finally let Ranger go, the scars were obvious. One of his ears no longer stood straight. A patch of fur on his right side had never fully grown back, but his eyes, they were the same. So when Ranger finally returned, tail wagging cautiously, head lowered, Cole dropped to his knees and sobbed into the dog's fur like a man who had just found his heart after thinking it had been buried overseas. From that day on, they were never apart. In their small town just outside Tucson, everyone knew them. Cole, the veteran with the limp who always had the German shepherd by his side, and Ranger, the one who never barked at strangers, but who'd once stopped a purse. Snatcher Cole with nothing but a stare and a low growl. Together, they rebuilt a life that had once seemed beyond repair. Cole worked at the local VFW, spoke at high schools, helped other veterans transition. But underneath it all, beneath the calm, the warm smiles, the storytelling, there was a storm, nightmares, survivors' guilt and pain. But Ranger would climb onto the bed and press his body against Cole's chest when the tremors hit. At 2 a.m., he would nudge the bottle away when Cole stared at it too long. And when Cole thought about disappearing, it was Ranger who stood in the doorway, silent, patient, refusing to let the darkness win. 2 months before the hospital, something changed. Cole began having chest pains, tight and sharp. He shrugged them off, told himself it was stress. Maybe too much coffee. Ranger knew better. He began acting strange, whining in the middle of the night, pacing by the bedroom door, refusing food. One morning, Ranger planted himself in front of Cole's truck and wouldn't move. It took 2 hours, and a call to a vet friend, for Cole to finally relent and go to the hospital. The diagnosis was a ticking bomb, a tear in a major artery. Surgery was scheduled immediately. Ranger wasn't allowed inside. Cole tried to argue, but the hospital had policies. Dogs weren't allowed in ICU, so Ranger was sent home with friends, while Cole went under. The surgery was successful, but Cole didn't wake up, and just like that, the waiting began. Back in the present, 3 days after Ranger stormed the hospital room, the news had spread. No one could explain how he got inside. The doors had been locked, the entry points secure. Some said he leapt over a barrier. Others claimed he snuck past a distracted orderly. But the truth didn't matter. He was there. And something about that moment, about that head pressed to a soldier's chest, shook. Something loose inside Cole. He began to respond, slowly. A hand twitch here, a soft groan there. His brain scans lit up for the first time in days. Doctors called it unexplainable stimulation. But everyone in the hospital knew what it really was. Love, memory, bond. Now, Cole was awake, barely. A weak whisper of a man, trying to piece together what had happened. Ranger hadn't left the room once. When a nurse tried to wheel him out, Cole's fingers flinched and the heart rate monitor spiked. So they let him stay. Night and day, he lay by the bed, one paw draped across Cole's blanket. Visitors came, reporters knocked, but Ranger didn't care for cameras or praise. He only had eyes for the man who once told him to run, so he could live. Now it was Ranger's turn to bring him back. But not. Everyone was happy about the reunion, just outside the hospital room. In a quiet conference room behind thick glass, 2 men in suits discussed something cold and calculated. One flipped open a file marked Classified, Military K-9 Project Archive. Inside was a photo. Cole, Ranger, and something else. A third man, with a blurred face. "Do we have confirmation?" one asked. The other nodded. The dog responded, "We've got to pull him in." Not until Matthews is stable. Any sudden move could compromise the situation. There was a pause. "Do you think he remembers?" The reply came slow, grim. "If he does it here, we've got a much bigger problem." Outside, Ranger stirred. His ears twitched, his eyes narrowed, focused on something far beyond the hospital walls, and for the first time since his return, he growled. 3 days after Cole whispered Ranger's name, the hospital released a statement calling the recovery miraculous. But miracles make people nervous, especially the kind that come wrapped in military scars. Cole was transferred to a private recovery suite. No longer in critical condition, he was alert, speaking short sentences, eating small meals. His body had begun healing. But something inside him wasn't settling. The dreams were back. No, not dreams. Memories. They were louder now, clearer. Not of war, of what came after, of what he'd forgotten, or maybe been made to forget. He would stare at Ranger for long stretches, brows furrowed, eyes flicking between recognition and something darker, like a door unlocking, one click at a time, and Ranger. He was alert again, too alert. He no longer rested beside the bed. He stood watch by the door, stiff, ears pinned, tail low, not from fear, but readiness. Something had changed in him too. He could sense it. They were being watched. It began subtly. Man in a maintenance uniform who never fixed anything. A nurse who never spoke but always passed by at the same time each morning. Unfamiliar faces in military-cut suits outside Cole's room, pretending to scroll on their phones. Even the hospital food tasted different. Saltless, measured. Then the incident with the blood draw. Cole winced as the tech pushed the needle in, but he noticed it immediately. The vial wasn't labeled. "Where's the tag?" The man smiled too wide. "Lab ran out, happens all the time." Cole didn't blink. "Stop. Get me someone else." The man froze. Ranger stood up. The growl was low, dangerous, primal. The man backed out fast. They never saw him again. 2 days later, it happened. The betrayal. Ranger was taken. It was supposed to be routine. A staff member in a white coat entered the room, clipboard in hand, smiling. "We need to run some tests. Behavioral analysis. Post-trauma scans for veteran service animals. VA protocols." Cole hesitated. Ranger sat beside him, unmoving. "Just an hour," the man said. "He'll be back before lunch." The old Cole might have asked more questions, might have fought it, but fatigue clouded his judgment. He nodded, and they led Ranger away. The moment the door clicked shut, something inside Cole broke. Hours passed. No update, no return. When he asked the nurses' station, they blinked in confusion. No one had ordered tests on Ranger. No one had come by for any animal protocols. "Are you sure, Mr. Matthews?" He tried to stand. His legs failed him. He collapsed hard against the floor, breathing shallow, voice cracking. They took him. By the time hospital security checked the footage, the cameras in the corridor had conveniently gone dark for exactly 6 minutes. Ranger was gone, and someone wanted it that way. Back in the room, Cole sat in a wheelchair, fists trembling in his lap. He stared at the floor, jaw clenched, mind spiraling. Ranger was more than a pet, more than a dog. He was evidence of something they'd both been part of, something he was just starting to remember. That night, Cole dug through his old belongings, the bag they brought in from his truck after the ambulance. He found it at the bottom, an old flash drive, one he didn't remember packing. He plugged it into the hospital laptop, encrypted files, one folder. No name, just a date. March 27, 2017, the day before Kandahar, the night before the explosion. He opened the only video file, grainy footage. Cole sat in a small desert tent, shirtless, bruised. His arm was bandaged, his voice hoarse. Across from him sat a man in a black tactical uniform with no insignia. Beside them, Ranger, younger, sharper. The man was speaking. "You're the only handler he responds to at this level. The conditioning has to stay between us." Cole frowned. "On the screen. In real time. You're talking about experimental combat imprinting. That's not what I signed up for." The man leaned in. "This isn't about signing papers. It's about outcomes." The video skipped, then continued, Cole's voice again, urgent. "He's a living creature, not a weapon." The man's tone dropped. "He's both. And you knew that when you let us alter him. Then, Ranger, in the background, jolted. He lunged at something off-screen, snarling. The man turned the camera off. The file ended. Cole sat back, eyes wide, hands trembling. He remembered now. The night before the explosion, they had tested something on Ranger, something Cole never wanted but had been pressured into approving, an experimental sensory enhancement protocol, neurological. Mapping, it was supposed to help with IED detection, but it had consequences. It made Ranger feel more, bond more deeply, disobey more dangerously. It made him choose his own orders. Ranger wasn't just loyal, he was sentient in ways he shouldn't be, and that terrified the military. Cole knew now. Ranger had been taken not because he was dangerous, but because he was proof that something illegal, unethical, and classified had been done to a soldier's companion, and buried deep. And now they were trying to erase it, erase him. Cole moved fast, called every contact, every veteran friend, everyone from his unit, all disconnected, numbers gone. Voicemail loops. They were scrubbing him, silencing every piece of his past. He knew what came next. They'd come for him too, unless he found Ranger first. Back in an underground facility 30 miles outside the city, Ranger stood behind a steel cage. Monitors surrounded him. 2 scientists observed through glass. One tapped at a keyboard. His vitals are stable, but cortisol is spiking. The other nodded. His handler's awake. He feels it. He shouldn't feel anything. Well, he does. The man turned to a shadowed figure behind them, a commander. The same blurred face from the photograph in Cole's file. "What do you want us to do?" The figure stepped forward. Voice sharp, eyes cold. "Wipe the bond." "What?" "Erase the memory tether, reset him. Make him forget Matthews ever existed." The younger technician paled. "That could fracture his neurological core. We don't know what it'll do." "I don't care." The room buzzed. Screens blinked red. Ranger's vitals spiked again. Then he looked up, right into the security camera, right into their eyes. And for the first time since he'd been taken, he bared his teeth, not in fear, but warning. Ranger refused to eat, refused to sleep, refused to obey. The lab techs tried commands, old ones, new ones. But Ranger just sat in the corner of the containment cell, ears flat, eyes locked on the door. Still as stone, watching, waiting. It wasn't the stillness of a broken dog, it was the stillness of a soldier anticipating war. They'd underestimated him, again. He wasn't just trained. He wasn't just altered. He remembered everything. And somewhere beyond the steel walls he knew Cole was coming. At the hospital, Cole was already 2 steps ahead. He'd slipped out that morning, discharged himself against medical orders, signed. A waiver with shaking hands wrapped in gauze and stubborn fury. The nurse protested. The hospital administrator begged him to stay, but his eyes were clear. Cold. "They took my dog." That was all he said, and no one dared stop him. He drove a rented car with one arm, a printed screenshot of a blurry GPS ping sitting in the passenger seat, data pulled from the flash drive's hidden partition. One signal. Last transmission. From Ranger's implanted microchip before it went dark. Cole stared at it, jaw tight. A fenced facility outside Langley, a decommissioned weapons research lab. But he remembered that place, because he'd once walked out of it with blood on. His boots and orders he never spoke of again. Now he was going back. By nightfall, he was parked in the woods, staring through binoculars at the perimeter lights. He didn't need a blueprint. He knew the layout. He'd been in the underground levels. He'd seen the kind of testing they didn't log in government files. Back then, it was experiments on brainwave syncing, how to link Handler and K9 into a seamless fighting unit. Now they were probably working on something far worse, something involving memory manipulation or erasure, and Ranger was the last active subject. They couldn't control. Inside the lab, alarms flashed quietly on a technician's console. "He's destabilizing. Vitals are spiking," the lead scientist frowned. "It's the bond. He's resisting the neural reset." "Should we sedate him?" The commander stepped forward again from the shadows. "No, prep the final protocol." The technician's face twisted. But that's a full memory wipe. You'll destroy everything that makes him, him. The commander's voice turned icy. He's not a him. He's a liability. Cole scaled. The rear fence ducking under motion sensors, heart pounding not from exertion, but from instinct. Muscle memory took over. He found the side maintenance hatch, still welded shut, except for the small crack he had etched years ago as an emergency exit. He pried it open. The metal groaned like a haunted thing. He was inside. The hallways were sterile. Cold, smelled like bleach and betrayal. Cole moved in silence, navigating the lower levels through half-lit corridors and closed doors. He paused outside Lab 7. He heard it. That growl, that deep, buried, throat-rattling growl. Ranger, he was alive, but not for long, if Cole didn't move fast. Inside the cell, the command to wipe the memory had been initiated. Blue light blinked along the neural interface, as the two techs' input codes. But the second technician hesitated. His hands shook. He turned to the commander. "Sir, I can't do this." The commander raised an eyebrow. "Excuse me?" He's not just a dog anymore. He remembers things. He understands. The commander drew his sidearm, cold, silent. "Get out." The technician fled. The commander took the console himself. Ranger met his eyes, and for a split second, the man hesitated, because something in that stare wasn't animal. It was rage and grief and memory. The lights cut out. Emergency red lighting. Flickered, then bang, the door to Lab 7 exploded inward. Cole stepped through the smoke, face pale, arm shaking. Gun drawn. He saw the commander, saw the wires connected to Ranger's skull, saw the fear just for a flash in that man's eyes. Step away from the dog. The commander turned slowly. "You're too late. We've already started the process." "Then, I'll finish it," Cole fired. Not at the commander, at the console. Sparks flew, the cables detached. The screen burst in static. Ranger collapsed to the floor. "Ranger!" Cole dropped his weapon and rushed to the cage, slamming his hand against the glass. Ranger didn't move. His chest rose, barely. Cole fell to his knees, his voice breaking. "No. No. Please." He placed his palm flat on the glass. "Come. Back, buddy, please." Ranger's ear twitched. Then his eyes flicked open. He saw Cole, and for one heartbeat, the bond reconnected, the kind of bond they tried to erase, and couldn't, because it wasn't written in wires or data or training. It was love, and that wasn't programmable. Ranger staggered to his feet, wobbling, then rammed the door, once, twice, a third time. The lock cracked. Cole opened it, collapsing into Ranger's embrace as the dog leapt into his arms, both wounded, both whole again, behind. Them. The commander stood frozen. Then he ran. They made it out through the side hatch before reinforcements arrived. Cole didn't stop driving for hours. Ranger rested beside him, eyes open, chest heaving. But he never let Cole out of his sight again. Not once. Not ever. They didn't go back to the hospital or the base. Cole drove to a safe house in the woods, a cabin owned by an old friend from his unit. There were no cameras there. No labs. No questions. Just peace. But the war inside Cole hadn't ended, because now he knew what they did. To his dog. To him. And he was going to make it right. They lived in the quiet for 3 weeks. The cabin was remote, tucked in the folds of the Appalachian woods, no cell service, no roads nearby. Just trees, wind, and stillness. Cole patched up his wounds with Ranger curled beside him on the floor like an old soul returned home. The dog never left his side, not even for food, not even for sleep. Every breath was watched, every twitch was guarded. Like Ranger believed if he blinked, Cole might disappear again. But peace never lasts for soldiers like them. One evening, Cole stepped outside with a mug of coffee in his good hand. He heard it, a drone overhead, silent, barely a hum. But Ranger's ears shot up, then his body rose, rigid, alert. Cole knew that posture. "Run, recon," he whispered, and Ranger vanished, into the brush. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Cole began pacing. 12 minutes in, Ranger returned with something clamped between his teeth, a tracking collar. Smashed. But it wasn't his. Cole's heart sank. They'd found him. That night, Cole made a decision. He sat by the fireplace, flickering light dancing across his face, hollow with the weight of what he knew had to happen. He scratched Ranger behind the ear. "You remember that cave we used to train in?" Ranger lifted his head slightly. His tail wagged once. Cole smiled, just barely. "I need you to go there. Wait for me." Ranger growled low, refused. Cole's smile faded. "I'm not giving you a choice." By morning, Ranger was gone. Cole had slipped a piece of his old uniform into the dog's carrier bag, a scent that would keep Ranger grounded, believing Cole would follow. He wouldn't. He had no intention of surviving the day. 2 hours later, the black vans arrived unmarked, 5 of them government men in suits, not military. Not FBI, the ones who operated between jurisdictions. They surrounded the cabin, no words, no warnings. Cole was already sitting on the porch, unarmed, hands visible, staring them down like a man who'd already made peace. "Where's the asset?" one asked. Cole didn't flinch. "He's free." "That wasn't the deal." "There was no deal," Cole growled. "You stole my dog. You tortured him. You tried to erase him." The lead agent stepped forward. "You knew the protocols when you volunteered. He was government property." Cole stood now, taller than the agents expected, spine straight despite his injuries. "Not anymore." A tense silence passed between them. "Then you're coming with us." Cole nodded once, but the agents didn't realize he wanted them to. They shackled him, hooded him, transported him to an undisclosed facility.